Finally, Clemson Sports Talk has come back to Drive Time. Hello, everybody. Lawton Swan back in the saddle. Once again, it is the show that shakes the Southland. Clemson Sports Talk for you each and every afternoon as you make your way around the great state of South Carolina and beyond, listening to us on incredible radio stations like Fox Sports Radio 1400 in the Midlands, of course, heard around the world on the iHeart Radio application. Download today. It is free. The website, put the .com on it. Doggone it. That's ClemsonSportsTalk.com. 803-450-0086. Your participation not required. Certainly encouraged here as we roll along on a Thursday afternoon. And you know what that means. Hour number 2, legendary Clemson SID Tim Beret joins the program. There's the man's credentials. If you want to follow him, go out and do it at Tim Beret on Twitter. He will join us in hour number 2 of the program. And, of course, we do the opening 20 minutes live with you on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. I think that's it. I can't even keep up anymore. Subscribe to all our channels, ring the bells, do the likes, do all of that, and come be a part of what we do and share your thoughts on Clemson's matchup with the Tennessee Volunteers. It is an all-orange affair at the Orange Bowl. Could there be, really, I mean, in college football, a more fitting matchup than this one to take place at the Orange Bowl? And I think for Clemson Tiger faithful, you know, when you go back and you think about your program's history, some of those great moments that have taken place at not just necessarily this venue per se, right, but at the old Orange Bowl back in 1981, 22-15 over Nebraska, a game in which when I was a kid, I was staying at my uncle's house out in Tioga, Texas. For those of you that don't know where that is, about an hour north of Dallas, hanging out there near Denton, that area of the state. He had a remote control for his VCR that had a cord on it. It connected to the VCR. Like you didn't even, you could only be a certain distance from the VCR. A corded remote. The only one I ever saw, I'm sure some of you are going, Swanee, that's what we had. Now look, we had the needle nose pliers when I was a kid. Like I remember my parents, because I had pulled all the knobs off of the old tube TV. You had the television set that eventually somebody just put another television on top of. We fortunately didn't cross over into the dueling televisions of doom, the leaning tower of TVs. We didn't have that at the Swan House, but I did pull the knobs off. And I can remember the only way you could get the knobs out was with the needle nose pliers. And Lord forbid, I at 5 years old misplaced the needle nose pliers. You think it's bad when you don't have the remote control. I mean, I was the remote control, right? You go up there and change the channel, kid. Punch the button, turn the knob. You had about 6 channels. But if you didn't have the needle nose pliers at my house, there was no TV that night. You couldn't get in there to get it on. Anyway, I may or may not have messed up all the vertical hold and adjust you had to take. I wonder sometimes now, strategically looking back, I think maybe my parents took those knobs off because of me as a child, not for me, not like I did it. You know, I didn't do it. It was more to protect me from eating them maybe. But anyway, we had no knobs. You had to use the needle nose pliers. I'm sure those were safer for a child. Nonetheless, 1981, that national championship game against, in the Orange Bowl, not against Tennessee, against Nebraska. But that game, I'm at my uncle's house watching on tape for the first time. I had never seen it. Like I think about, being a kid born in 1977, that 1981 national championship. My parents didn't have a tape of it. It wasn't YouTube. My uncle had it on tape. And I stayed at his house and I watched that game 3, 4, 5 times. And I was probably 10 years old, so it's probably 1987, 1988, somewhere in there. And so, you were holding on to a piece of that. And then Clemson would play in like a Citrus Bowl against a Penn State or against an Oklahoma. And you go, one day we'll cross that bridge again, I hope. I hope one day we get that national championship. And so back then, it was still the time where Clemson could compete at or near the top of college football. And you had Danny Ford as your head coach, and you still had that legacy of being a team that once climbed to the top of college football. And so I'm at my uncle's house watching this game over and over again, and loving every minute of it. And so this venue, for so many of you that made that trek down in 1981, that made that trip to the Orange Bowl. And again, not the same venue. I say venue, but you know what I mean. Like, this bowl means so much to Clemson Tiger fans because for so many years, you'd go over to Jervey Gym. You'd go over there and you'd see the Orange Bowl trophy. And it was for so many years, it was the greatest accomplishment that Clemson had. And then, of course, you eventually break through, and obviously you had your hiccup with West Virginia. We don't want to talk about that one. But you break through, you beat Ohio State in the Orange Bowl. Then you get into the college football playoff. And for the first time, really, since that 1981 season, you were in a bowl game that gave you a chance to go and play for all the marbles. You knew if you beat Oklahoma, you'd get a chance to play for the championship. You were undefeated, and what did you do? You went in there 37-17. You take down the Oklahoma Sooners, and you advance to the championship game. And that venue, just still, even in that moment, being the Orange Bowl. I mean, that was an incredible moment to knock off the Sooners, who even back then, people still saw that program as so much greater than Clemson. And you win that game and you're headed to the Orange Bowl. Man.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah is right. Just awesome. 803-450-0086. Now, this time around, you're at the Orange Bowl. Doesn't have quite the punch that it did. It's not in the college football playoff. Now, Dabo Swinney called it essentially a playoff game, and it certainly will be when the expanded playoff takes place. Now, I think the timing of Coach Swinney's comments a little bit off, given the fact that so many of you out there believe, like I do as well, that the Tigers, the way they played in the ACC championship with Cade Klubnik, not to say Cade should have been the guy against South Carolina the entire game. Not saying that Cade Klubnik should have been the guy against Notre Dame. I don't know. Maybe he wasn't ready, as the coaches have said. But the thing you've heard from me on this program all year long is that Cade Klubnik should have had more opportunities to play throughout the season.
How dare you fill my head with such loathsome propaganda?
I apologize. But the fact of the matter is that when we look at DJ and the way he played, I said he was great at playing just good enough to not get benched, but never great enough to have to watch from the sidelines because you've demolished somebody. When I brought up the stats about Drake May last week and how his numbers were, I saw a tweet today from David Hale at ESPN about Drake May's numbers by comparison to some of the great football players that we've seen in recent years. And I can give you that in just a second. But the thing I want to focus on is the way people came back to me on that is, well, the difference in Drake May and Deshaun and Trevor and all of that is the fact that he played more, a number of snaps. You got to calculate that. I don't disagree. I don't disagree. The Drake May, 4,115 yards, 35 touchdowns, 653 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns. Every P5 quarterback in the past 20 years to post 4,100, 35 touchdowns, 650 plus rushing, and 7 touchdowns on the ground. RG3, who won the Heisman. Johnny Manziel, who finished 5th for the Heisman in 2013. Marcus Mariota, who won the Heisman in 2014. Deshaun Watson, who finished 3rd. Deshaun Watson, who finished 2nd. Kyler Murray, who won it in 2018. And then May, who's not even in the top 4. And that was the point of emphasis on that tweet from David Hale. But if you just for a minute, take a step back and take a look at the opportunity that could have presented itself earlier in the year had DJ been that type of quarterback, that elite level quarterback, getting Cade Klubnik in the ball game. More opportunities for Clemson to have groomed him further along so that maybe against Notre Dame, even if you put him in with his back against the wall, he performs at the highest level. Maybe against South Carolina, you get him in a little earlier. Maybe Clemson does win that game, and you are actually in a playoff game, which is why I think, Dabo Swinney's comments are a little ill-timed, given the fact that you're a smidgen away from being in the college football playoff. And I know Gamecock fans don't love that take because they'll say, well, the ifs and buts, and I get it. If grandma had rubber wheels, she'd be a bicycle. I'm with you. I understand where you're coming from, Gamecock Nation. But for Clemson Tiger fans, the reality of how close this year was should be the thing that you gloat on the most. But it is a matchup of two teams inside the top 10. Tennessee ranked number 6. Clemson ranked number 7. The Volunteers, obviously, the situation with Hendon Hooker getting hurt in that South Carolina game. And look, if you're somebody that didn't see Tennessee and South Carolina and you think, oh, well, that's certainly why the Gamecocks won. No. The Gamecocks were in full control of that ball game when Hendon Hooker got hurt. The only thing that happened when Hooker got hurt was the recognition that Tennessee had no chance to come back, because I think there were some Gamecock fans who have been in that fire, right, in that battle of being a Gamecock fan for an extended amount of time, that thought to themselves, any second now it's going to go squirrely. Something's going to go bad. That means Murphy's Law is going to land in Williams-Brice Stadium. And then Hooker gets hurt, and you really know at that point it's over. It's over. So now Clemson will face that Tennessee team without Hendon Hooker, which doesn't necessarily steal all of the thunder from the ball game, because, for fairness sakes, if you haven't heard enough, the Gamecocks calling this the Who's Your Daddy game, being as they knocked off both Tennessee and Clemson in back-to-back weeks, 2 top 10 wins, the first time that's ever happened in the history of South Carolina's program. They also are sort of championing that they're playing in the Who Beat Clemson Bowl, as well as the Gamecocks are taking on Notre Dame in the Gator Bowl. All that being said, what are your thoughts, early thoughts, on Clemson and Tennessee? We'll hear some from Dabo Swinney. We'll let you hear that comment that he made yesterday as well. That's kind of turned and perked up the ears of the Clemson Tiger faithful. I will say, and I mentioned this, geographically speaking, outside of South Carolina and Georgia, I mean, Tennessee really is kind of that next power football program right in your backyard, so to speak, in terms of the college football landscape. So any win over the Volunteers is a good win. And when I was growing up, Tennessee was coming routinely into the state of South Carolina and recruiting some of the best players in this state to go play in that program. Phil Fulmer, he never had Tennessee where Clemson has been under Dabo Swinney or where Alabama has been under Nick Saban. But you could make an argument that his Tennessee teams were certainly in a class eerily similar to, say, in Oklahoma in recent years under Bob Stoops and Lincoln Riley. It was a team that was kind of on the fringe of always contending with a chance maybe in a different era where you didn't have the playoffs too, right? but all total, still a very recognizable program on the national landscape, and one this year with a huge emergence. So it's a big opportunity for Clemson from that standpoint, not to mention the Tigers losing to arguably, the two teams outside of the ACC that they've played, and maybe the two best teams they've played outside of the ACC, both ranked in the top 20, top 25. Certainly South Carolina's creeping up the rankings, and then Notre Dame. So a chance to win against the top 16. So a big deal for Clemson there. Steven chimes in and says, Swanee, Clemson will beat Tennessee again. I certainly hope so. That game back in 2003, I guess technically the date was, I believe, in 2004, but the culmination of that season and that 63-17 victory over South Carolina, and then into the Peach Bowl, Chick-fil-A Bowl, I guess it was at that time, to beat Tennessee. Man, that was awesome. That's one that if you go back and rewatch it, it's just something magical about that little stretch for that Clemson team. It felt like they were playing the way you had always hoped that they would. And I never will forget being in Atlanta for that one. Clemson fans, Tennessee fans, everywhere. And for the Tigers to win that game convincingly in the way they played, man, that meant a lot. That meant a lot. Tim says, I live in the Midlands of the middle of SEC country, but my heart belongs to the ACC. Go Tigers. Appreciate it, Tim. Justin says he thinks Clemson will win because of their defense. That might be the thing, right? Like South Carolina moved the ball so well against Tennessee, you would believe. And again, it's going to be interesting without DJ, how Cade Klubnik plays when the weight of the program is on his back. I mean, it was on his back on Saturday night, and he played so well. I mean, unbelievably well in the ACC championship. But how does he play when there is no next man up behind him like DJ? And then ultimately, I think it was positive what you saw from Hunter Johnson. Justin goes on to say, South Carolina manhandled their backup, so I'm thinking we can too. Cade gave us the spark. And that'll be the thing. How does Clemson's defensive line play? How well can they, create a little havoc? Certainly, it's hard to gauge who these teams are now. And this is one of my beefs with the portal. I mean, it's like, okay, well, who's Tennessee got in the portal and who's not playing? And has Clemson got anybody that's portaled out and not playing? And does Tennessee have guys sitting? So it's really at this point just kind of a grab bag of who's going to be out there. But I am interested to see what you all think about this game as we close in on it. Again, December the 30th, it'll be the Tigers, an all-orange affair at the Orange Bowl. There are not two more fitting teams probably in Power 5 football to match up in this game. Maybe, I will say this, and Tennessee fans, I know you're going to be offended by my next comment. Clemson and Oklahoma State would be two better color oranges squaring off. They're two very similar. I don't really like the Tennessee orange. Tennessee orange is sort of a yellowish hue, kind of, not great. Not great, in my opinion. But what do I know? I mean, I got on the real orange today, right? That's what the Tiger fans will tell you, at least. All right, we got a break coming up. Listen, we're going to be rocking and rolling on iHeartRadio in just a second. Fox Sports Radio 1400 Midland, turn around the world on the iHeartRadio app. Check it out. We'll be right back. We'll hear from Dabo Sweeney and Josh Heupel right after this. All right, everybody on the YouTube feed, thank you for hanging out with us, and definitely hope you'll come over, catch the podcast, check out the website. Again, that's ClemsonSportsTalk.com, but we'll be back here tomorrow to do the opening 20 minutes with you on the show that shakes the Southland.